There's a profound capability that we have to see this incredible dualistic construct. Yeah, the yin or yang of things, even though at the fundamental core, the foundational line of every hexagram is yin. Sometimes it shows up as yang. So there's a little bit of yang and a little bit of yin in everything. And because they're dualistic, there's everything in human design is, and everything about hexagrams are, that's an or not as well. There's always the binary for the most part. So then there's an off-on switch in what we call the dying sequence. And that's what we're going to explore. Part one of this death, dying, and bardo sequence in the codons and the amino acids that are appropriate to each one of these hexagrams. So now as you look at these, do they look familiar to you? I know for me personally that several of these do, because I've heard of them over my years of learning about holistic health, as a massage therapist, as a young adult, very young adult, and then learning about was a yeah, the brain is not doing very well at recalling words at the moment. Oh, personal trainer. Became a personal trainer, did nutrition and energy healing and all kinds of things. And, just if you're one of those biohackers, then it does really come up, these particular amino acids that are linked to the codons. So, in other words, according to Ra, this dying sequence has a specific mechanism inside of us in specific places that triggers the termination of our life's process. So, in certain chemistries, these certain codons and their amino acids, the certain aspects of the codons, the chemical components that are released at specific times. So, basically, what these things are doing is it's shutting down your body, though they don't just only shut it down. It's not just saying no to life, but it's also preparing your body for the approach of death itself. And so to have the kind of death that you came here to have accordingly with what's right for you to experience. And it's interesting to think of death as a state of being. But if you think about what the bardo is for the passenger, it is a being of a different sort, in that you're still connected up with the body, the mental brain system still has electrical firings, and you have your decarnation process. So the approach of death itself is one of the things that we're also going to be analyzing. And the sequence of the 5 hexagrams that are involved here in the wheel is going to be very specifically keyed to you and your genetic potential, because oftentimes they're in our designs. Yeah, I can see 1, 2 for me, and 3 if we count Chiron or Chiron, however you want to say that. So we can see then that the ice moon cometh for all of us. And some of us will carry specific lines that are in the construct, and they may be specifically affected by the moon. So it's interesting to think that the moon can affect us every single month as we are dying constantly and then say yes and are rebirthed, reborn, begin again anew, especially for those of you who are reflective in nature. So every month, month after month, the moon going through those particular gates, and about every half a day, the moon moves through a hexagram. So there's a specific kind of pacing, you could say, that takes place in this shutting down process, according to Ra. The movement from the 10 and to the 3 is a relatively huge movement. See how much space and time it takes to go relative to the wheel as a whole from 10 to gate 3. That's 9 days. okay, about a third of the wheel. So we're dealing with a huge movement between the first stage and the second stage. Between the second stage and the third stage, though, it's a very short period of time. Okay, very short period of time, just 2 days. And then to get to the expansion that we have. So it's kind of an alternating process. Long and then short, and then long. Oh, that's 8 days for us to get to the 29th gate. This really is where the body says yes or no to life. That's the deciding factor. And then we move to the night or 14, and that's 7 days. That's the fifth stage. Okay, the fifth stage. So everyone is initiated to the potential of their natural death through this sequence. So natural death, according to Ra, happens through that lunar cycle process that's going through these specific death stage 1, the 10, stage 2, the 3, stage 3, the 2, stage 4, the 29, stage 5, the 14. So when we understand the sequence, that everybody is initiated in this sequence, we can see then that potential of the natural death happens through this sequence. And once a sequence has been completed, that is, once the movement has gone from the 10 all the way through the other gates too into the 14, and that movement of the moon beyond the sequence, sometime between the moon leaving the cusp of the 14 and before it can re-enter it, the actual death takes place. So death taking place in the natural stages of the moon. In this sequence, that preparation for the journey of leaving the body behind, the body going to its final rest, and the personality decarnating. So everyone gets timed in the same way. But everyone's doorway is separate or different. Everybody releases through a specific doorway. This is the sequence of death preparation. That is the preparation that sets one up on the permanent dying track, if you could put it that way, as far as, okay, it's time to leave. And when we set up the permanent dying track, because remember, to speak to it that way, he reminds us too that all of us are dying every month. We're dying and being reborn every month. And so the permanent dying track that sets us up for the movement outwards, that journey of leaving the form behind, everyone goes through the same process. You just may have a different exit doorway. So each and every one of these gates are going to be very significant to moving us through the process. So when we look at them in sequence, the first thing we're going to see is this gate 10, treading, gate of the behavior of the self. The 10th gate, love of self. And it also brings us the role for survival. Ross says that it's a very extraordinary role gate because it's the most complex of all the role gates, right? It opens up to integration. So the role for survival, the role for following one's convictions, the role for higher principles, yeah, the role of being oneself. So interesting that death would begin self with self. So when we talk about the 10th gate, it is the most mundane, at its most mundane. All of this is about its potential for the perfected form of survival or not. No, it really makes sense. Hey, survival or not, because this is the beginning of the death sequence, the gate 10. You can have this direct connection between behavior and awareness or energy or manifestation, communication, metamorphosis. And when you get to the perfected form for survival or not, there is this integration of what it is to be an archetype of perfecting the form, yeah, for survival, as far as developing the existential capacity to survive with awareness, yeah, the being, behavior, surviving. So the existential capacity to survive with an awareness that is the initiation of intelligence accordingly to the 10th gate of behavior. All of that's ruled, the role for survival, ruled by the 10th gate. It's a gate of love. Not only the transcendent love, I love my world or not, but also the personal love. It's the only love gate that does dual duty, the potential to be personally loving towards oneself. Human design predicated on the innocent love of self. Yeah. So the gate of loving oneself in this world, being yourself in this life, and everything about the 10th gate, treading on the tail of the tiger, do beware, beware. Everything is there, this 10th gate, about the deepest identity to the life force itself, right? Life force, as first we come into form through this behavioral gate, being the first trigger that exits us or begins the exit process, I should say, predicated upon the movement of the moon. So, stage 2, difficulty at the beginning. This is the gate of ordering. It is difficult, isn't it? At the beginning of anything. Oh, boy, do I know that one to be true. A third gate, this third gate, is instrumental to building life because it's the key to understanding our whole reproductivity process. See sacral, think reproductive. The third gate is dealing with beginnings. Okay, the life force beginning. Ah, we are all mutative creatures. Did you know? Of course you knew. We're all different. So everything about the third gate and its process here, it's turning off its openness or readiness to deal with anything new. Yeah, kind of like if you think about the sacral, remember they're all power gates and they're all about mm-hmm or mm-mm. So when this is gate 3, the moon going through, it's shutting down the receptivity, the responsiveness, shutting down, in essence, the whole mutative program. No mutation. Instead, we have stagnation, which means death. The moon shutting it all down. And in the 4th line, we can see here the understanding that we have with influence or contagiousness with the 4th line. Remember the 3, powerful gate of mutation or no more mutation. We have to mutate in order to stay alive. We have to change, don't we? So in terms of how we see this 4th line, if you have somebody in your life who has a 4th line in their profile and they have a common cold, Ross says, stay away from them because they're more likely to give it to you than anybody else. It's the influence that is there. Now, is it truly? Remember to experiment. Try it and see. The influence of the 3.4 shutting down of the mutative capacity is going to impact all the cells of the body. You remember why? Because this is the design of cells. Yeah. All cells have a crystal. All cells have a design. All cells are imprinted, we find, with flow, don't you know, and individual mutation of the 3. Difficulty at the beginning, ordering. Cells need to be ordered, don't they? Now, what we see about the influence that this gate 3 can have over the body, this is something very special to remember about the 3rd gate, in that it's part of the design of cells in this process of being in flow, along with the potential opening to the 60, which is limitation. Yeah, so the 60 opens up to the 3 being in response to accept that limitation and order accordingly to the mutation. So when the influence of the shutting down of the mutative capacity is taken place or it's taken into consideration, what you see is the fact that it is initiated by a 4th line, according to Ra, as something to grasp that it's going to impact every single cell of your body. And that's something to see. Or I would say, no, you might know it before you see it. And sometimes you can see death, you can smell it, you can taste it. Okay, so the next stage 3, this receptive, gate 2, the direction of the self, we know this to be the home of the magnetic monopole. We move to the driver, and this is the second gate, where you see the shutdown of the mutative process immediately moves to the core of the higher self, that monopole. And once it reaches the monopole literally sets the direction. So see the pattern so far. We have had the 10, which is both individual and integration, isn't it? And then we've had the 3, which is individual, part of knowing, circuitry. And then we've had the 2. We know that to be individual as well, and also about knowing. So it is about the individual death process and that monopole literally setting our direction. Now see the second line reads, it can only be called by that 3. The 3 is called to shut down or if the 3 is called to, I should say, the 2 is called to be shut down by the influence of the 3.4. So when the 2 in the second line, gate 2, second line, receives the call, that's the moment that the monopole will realign its direction, time for decarnation, where the monopole is moving towards its final place in space. My mind wanted to say resting place, although he didn't say that. He says, quote, basically what that means is that the monopole is moving towards its final place, that it's about is a mystical statement I can make about the nature of the magnetic monopole. After all, it's the responsibility in that sense, if I can anthropomorphize that, it's the responsibility of the monopole to bring us in the right place at the right time. That is its function. It brings us into the world at the right place and right time. It's intended to drop us off in the right place at the right time. That's its job. I can also remember him quite strongly saying, oh, that's unquote, by the way, death is a place, your death is a place. And if I can digress, just shift gears a teeny tiny bit. Lavina's been studying Vedic astrology since 2017, was invited into it in 15 by Ra's wife. And so interesting to me to see that there are places on a map that is a death indicator, according to Vedic. And we found, my husband and I, when we moved here, we would have to take my daughter to the airport regularly. And gosh, it's so stressful down there in Phoenix. Such a long drive for me personally. It's like 4 hours and just a little bit too much. So he tended to do it. And every time he went, he felt like he was never going to get out alive. And he felt this like crushing death experience. And then when we looked, his Venus line is there. And that Venus line was his death indicator. So I just find it so interesting that, too, Ross saying death is a place, and that certain places in the world can be those places where you are literally not going to get out alive. Quite an interesting thing to see. Okay, back to human design. So every step along the way, until you reach that 29th gate, it's reversible. Okay, so stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, 10, gate 10, 3, and 2, they're all reversible. But it's something to see that because this sequence is beginning with behavior. So the behavior of the vehicle getting ready for a new direction, and shifting gears takes time. You can't just turn the wheel suddenly without severe discombobulation, I'll say, according to your body. The way that a natural death happens is that it's going to take some time to change directions. So the way that the sequence operates naturally, you can see it takes a bit of time, relatively speaking, within the month. So the vehicle going through its step-by-step process, remember, we do this every month. We do this every month. So once you get beyond that monopole, once the monopole has set the direction in motion, then you come to the most extraordinary of gates. And here is the point of no return, the abysmal, the deep within the deep, the gate of perseverance. It is the decision gate. And here is Lavina's grounding of her incarnation cross, in the earth, conscious earth. The 29th gate is the core of how duality operates in our Maya. It says yes or it says no. It's the decision gate for death. So it's the only one of the gates that specifically, truly is about decision making. And this is one of the reasons why it's respectful to ask, not just people who have the 29th gate, but anybody. Ask them, or at least give them the opportunity to be available for the energy to respond or to agree or whatever it happens to be. It is the gate of yes and no. The abysmal, perseverance. It brings a commitment to the body. You see on the other side is gate 46. Love of the body, of embodiment, of the temple. So this great gate of yes and no is the commitment to the experiential way, the discovery process, the human essential process of being embodied. Because without a body, we are not human. Yes? And in the entire sacral center, there's nothing like this 29th gate. It's an enormous power. This enormous power to make the commitment to saying yes to life. This has to be shut down. This is the final point of no return. So you lock the door and you throw away the key, because after this, you go beyond this, then you're in the sequence and there's no coming back, according to Ra. In other words, this is the place of no return. And so isn't that kind of interesting when we see people just thinking about what we hear of people having accidents rather than the natural death? Okay, instead of the natural death, let's think about accidents for a moment, where somebody is receiving CPR and they haven't gone through their natural death process. They're getting their CPR, they get that electroshock, and boom, they're right back at it. There was no asking. It was yanked back from that point of no return because it didn't really actually happen. Isn't that interesting? Now let's see. The 6th line looks beyond the horizon, don't they all? The thing to see about 6 lines is that there's this tendency to look for what's next, what's beyond. It's the dream of the 6 to look beyond the horizon, to look beyond what is actually there. So more than that, Ross says it's something very special, almost cliche, about how death seems to bring dignity to the ending of the life, and the fact that so many beings in their process of naturally leaving this plane give off an essence that is often so remarkably different from the way in which they live their lives. The peace settling over them, the acceptance settling over them. It's wonderful to see that settling in or settling down rather than the fear or terror. So the 29 gives us the tranquilizing chemistries in the brain so that there is this release from the body, the decarnating process. So if we think about the 29, then the abysmal, deep within the deep, the thing that makes the commitment to death. When that 29th gate does that, it releases Ross's pheromones and chemistries closely related to what we would refer to as opiates. Okay, that tranquilizing taking place. in essence, the part of the way that this body vehicle shuts down. And because this is sixth line, that quality of the role model being an example. If we could imagine what it would be like if everybody met their death in horror, our movies, our murder mysteries, that would be horrible, right? That would be terrible to have everybody leave like that. There is this almost, Ross says, drugged quality or a distance and a smoothness that comes into the naturally decarnating process, the naturally dying vehicle. And that's the trigger that the 29th gate gives us. Not to simply say no to life experience, but actually to say yes to death and yes to dying. In 2020, yeah, it was 20, fall, I can remember laying on my bed, not being able to move. I mean, quite literally not being able to move, and tears leaking out of my eyes because I couldn't move, physically could not move. I was so sick. I felt like I was dying. And I could understand finally. It was one of those experiences where finally I could understand how people would want to die. Up until that point, like, no, like really let go of the body from the illness or dis-ease, not from the teenage angst of I hate it here, I wish I was never born, went through that too. Or the real deep dark depression of it seems so hopeless, I just want to end myself. But the actual experience of being in a body that wanted to say no to life. I so wish I had that day and time because I can remember it so clearly. I can remember exactly where I was at, the way I was laying on the bed, my daughter and my husband's faces. So being able to say no to the life process is one thing, but saying yes to death, that's a totally different story, isn't it? Can you feel the difference? The tranquilizing effect that those chemistries have to offer in the brain, the body. Now, after the 29, we move to the 14. That's stage 5. And in this moment, at that stage, we surrender to the higher power, God, if you like, whatever the forces are, surrendering to fate, to destiny, to karma, to chaos, whatever it is that you'd like to surrender to, the greater powers that be, that brings the energy to surrender. Gate 14. This brings enormous power skills. It is the gate of money mutation. Did you know? This is possession in great measure. So it brings the energy for surrender in the deepest way that one cannot do anything about it. We cannot reverse it. We cannot change it. All we can do is embrace it. Nothing more and nothing less. So what's interesting to me to see now in the pattern of recognition is besides these individual gates, yeah, we have one that's standing out, this one, and then back to individuality. So what's the commonality between 29 and 14? What do you guys see? I guess you would say 2 as well, but truly, I'm looking at these 2, okay? Part of the incarnation cross on either arm, okay? So it's an exact 88 degrees apart, isn't it? Because one is going to be, I'm not sure for certain, but please correct me if I'm wrong. But because this is my earth and this is my unconscious sun, it's an off step. So it's almost, something around that to that effect. And they're both tantric gates, as in the power to empower the identity. So it's no surprise that also, too, these are both part of the penta dynamics, the small group gates. So death is a process we all go through. And there's a certain orientation to how this happens, not naturally, anyway, so to speak. And that we can do nothing about it once we come back through from, have gone beyond, there we go, the point of no return. And such power that is there. Now, what are we aware of? We see in the death process, if we put all of the gates together, there's the power to empower the death direction. Channel of the beat, design of being a keeper of the keys. So if we were to anthropomorphize the death process, who am I for myself? Yeah, marching to the beat of my own drum. My behavior empowered in a new direction, committed to this last final step out of the body, out of the mutative game of the form. So this is the movement, like clockwork, like a clock ticking. You've got your ice moon, I would call it, going through the checking off of each one of these gates as it goes along, and slowly in this chain of events, which is all a chemical process basically, the chain of events taking place within the form. So, of course, we have the personality being conditioned, isn't it, by the form principle. If you adrenalize the form, the personality gets rather antsy. If you sedate the form, the personality calms down because the personality is helpless. So it's the hardware that matters, and death is a hardware business. It's only about the package of, this process, the termination, if you will, of the package, the vehicle, the process of living, but also recognizing that as the chemistry of the vehicle changes, certain things about the brain function are altered, certain chemistries are released. So that's what we're looking at when we see this shutting down mechanism.